Vladimir Putin was morally responsible for the death of Dawn Sturgess, according to the inquiry into her death. She died in 2018 after spraying herself with a perfume bottle given to her as a gift. It contained the nerve agent Novichok and had been left behind by Russian agents sent to assassinate the Russian defector Sergei Skripal. The inquiry chair, Lord Hughes, said today that the 3 Russian agents were acting on Putin's orders.
Petrov, Bosharov and Fedotov were, as I've said, members of an operational team within the GRU. I am sure that in conducting this attack on Sergei Skripal, they must have been acting on instructions received from their superiors. And I've concluded that the operation to assassinate Sergei Skripal must have been authorized at the highest level, indeed by President Putin.
The Security Minister, Dan Jarvis, told MPs the UK would bring in new sanctions on the Russian GRU intelligence agency.
Today, my right honourable friend, the Foreign Secretary, has imposed a further cost on the Russian regime by sanctioning the GRU under the Russia sanctions regime, along with several associated individuals. These sanctions recognise the continued reckless and destabilising activity of the GRU, which seeks to undermine Ukraine, European security and the safety of the United Kingdom.
Mark Urban is a Times columnist, host of the Crisis Room podcast. He's covered this story since the beginning, including interviewing Sergei Skripal. Mark, thank you for your time this afternoon.
Not at all. In fact, before the beginning, in the sense that when I spoke to him, it was several months before the poisoning. I was working on a book project and I got to go into that house at Christie Miller Road in Salisbury and talk to him there, at a time when, of course, not that many people were even aware of his existence.
But clearly the Russians were. Can we go back to the beginning, Mark, and can you remind us of what we knew at the time and has been reconfirmed today, what was an audacious, brazen assassination attempt?
Yes, I mean, look, we've got this inquiry report and I was there when it opened in Salisbury back in October last year. And the inquiry counsel, the senior lawyer, basically said to the public, look, we're probably never going to be able to put these people on trial who came to Salisbury and did this. So we're going to release a lot of the evidence that the police have that backs up the judgments you heard today and you mentioned in your headlines. And so what we got over the course of the inquiry and the evidence given around this time last year, in fact, by the anti-terrorist branch, was a lot of detail, all the stuff relating to the suspects' phone records, their previous travels to other places, all the lies they told on their visa applications, and the ways that, their false identities could be opened up and their real identities established, the operations of this GRU, that's Russian Military Intelligence Unit, that they belong to. And indeed, the fact that they had made 4 trips in Salisbury up to Skripal's house. And the first one of these was, if you like, a reconnaissance trip. They did a couple of trips up for that purpose. Then on the Sunday, the 4th of March, 2018, when it happened, they went up once, it's believed, to put the poison, this nerve agent, onto the door handle. And then they went back again, apparently to observe Skripal as he was leaving the house. So, there was evidence from CCTV, from their phones, all sorts of other things, which put them in Salisbury and in that vicinity at those times.
And what we've heard in the inquiry today, which is what we suspected but has been sort of confirmed, Putin is found to be morally responsible for her death.
Yes, I mean, the inquiry chair, Lord Hughes, he's a judge, and his entire life has been spent, in the criminal justice system on this idea of beyond reasonable doubt. And he says in the report, I'm not going to say as a fact anything I'm not sure of. And he says that the fact that this was ordered at the highest level, indeed he mentioned in the clip you heard there, Vladimir Putin, was a fact. Now, there's various bits of evidence for why the GRU would not do a thing like this without a high-level sign-off. But we have to ask at the end of this process whether some of the evidence he heard in secret related to that judgment, to him being so sure that Putin himself had signed off on this. And of course, we don't know that. He says to us in the report, I'm not going to tell you exactly what I heard in secret, obviously enough, but he hints that, whether more could have been done to protect Skripal, and indeed the kind of high-level approval for the operation were subjects that he did hear evidence about in secret. So, if people were expecting a sort of slam dunk, an idea that in a particular email Putin was boasting about having ordered this operation, we didn't get that today, but we did get this factual assertion from the inquiry chair that this had happened.
You've spoken to Sergei Skripal, the target of the attack that tragically then Dawn Sturgess lost her life. Tell us why they were so interested in him, and why then the report concludes that it was reasonable to assess at the time that he wasn't at a high risk of assassination. We may think, based on his background, which would be helpful if you can explain, that he would be in that category.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is a really interesting subject, and it is undoubtedly very much concerned Dawn Sturgess's family, which was an important question, therefore, in the way that this inquiry was constituted. Why didn't people know he was there? Why wasn't more effort made to protect him? He was in that community, and Dawn Sturgess's family had said, going back to the period shortly after her death, look, we didn't know this guy was here. Did putting him here put us at additional risk? All that kind of thing. Now, when I went down to talk to him several months before the poisoning, there was no obvious security at his home. And indeed, I even mentioned that to him. And then I sort of said, does anyone know I'm here? That kind of thing. And he said, well, yes, they do. But, there weren't people there, bodyguards or that kind of thing. So that was one of the things I picked up while I was there. So today we have this judgment that from the inquiry, that more could have been done by way of a sort of process of constant risk assessment by the people, and that's principally MI5, the security service, who look after former agents and people who've worked for the government in these sensitive roles when they come to this country. So there was this kind of implied criticism, but at the same time, the inquiry chair said, and I think this was with an eye to things that had been said by Dawn Sturgess's family, that even if they'd got a better sense that the risk to him might have been rising, they couldn't have done anything to have actually prevented the attack. And I guess that goes to a sort of judgment about, were the Russians just determined to do this and take considerable risks? Obviously, with the population of Salisbury, as we tragically saw with Dawn Sturgess, and of course, several other people were contaminated badly, including Skripal and his daughter, Yulia, and indeed, more generally with the sort of way that Russia would be regarded in the world. If you sent military officers, colonels in their intelligence service to Britain with rather flimsy fake IDs that would quickly be rumbled, and using a poison that, could reasonably have been assumed to have come from a Russian government lab, were you not actually deliberately saying loud and clear that this is Russia doing it? And, that's all part of what I think the intelligence services and the inquiry today has concluded was part of the rationale for doing it, that it was a sort of demonstration of Russian power and that they don't forgive people who've betrayed them.
Yeah, I mean, the inquiry also said that Russian agents showed no regard for innocent lives at all. I mean, they were obviously tasked with conducting an assassination on the streets of Salisbury. They weren't successful in the aim they actually achieved to. But I mean, I think brazen is the right word.
Yeah, I mean, look, there was when I think this vial of Novichok poison was eventually found. You heard these estimates from the scientists that poured them down, that the amount of poison in there was theoretically sufficient to kill thousands of people. They had, it's believed, sealed it up in plastic after they applied it to the Skripal's door handle, and before it's thought they threw it away somewhere, probably in a dustbin. So that one small measure, I guess, was taken to try and contain the risk to themselves and the people of Salisbury.
Mm.
But yeah, I mean, it's quite possible that, someone else might have found this and started playing with it or examining it, and the consequences could have been even worse. It was reckless in that sense, and it appears to have been designed to have sent a very deliberate signal, to have had Russia's fingerprints, as it were, on it. Traitors beware.
You mentioned Dawn Sturgess' family. They've been speaking this afternoon. We can hear from them now that they said that the reports left them with some questions.
Today's report has left us with some answers, but also a number of unanswered questions. We have always wanted to ensure that what happened to Dawn will not happen to others, that lessons should be learnt, and that meaningful changes should be made. The report today contains no recommendations. That is a matter of real concern. There must be reflection and change.
Mark, what do you think those changes should be?
Yeah, it is interesting and poignant, really, to hear them there reflecting on this. I guess they want to feel that something happens as a result of this tragedy. I think it's fair to say that one of the reasons this wasn't recommended is because it's already happened, which is the extending of much better protection to other people in a similar situation. We're not talking about very many. You could probably count them on the fingers of your hands, but these would be one or two other Russian defectors or agents who've now been resettled in this country. And indeed, there could be some individuals from, terrorist or other organizations who similarly have provided intelligence to the UK in the past, and resettlement was all part of the deal with them. So it is definitely the case that security around such people has been considerably tightened since the Salisbury poisonings. And I guess we have to accept that in the absence of formal recommendations, as Dawn's family said, that's the change that will come about. I think probably Lord Hughes struggled with the question of, look, what happened here so singular, so unusual, both that it's hard to see how it could have been prevented, and indeed hard to see how it can be prevented in the future. And I guess in the end, with these things, you end up with a tightening of procedures. I mean, at one point, he was critical of the security service for not doing more regular risk assessments of was it really safe for Skripal to be at home with no CCTV, no close protection? He was on the electoral roll, people could find him indeed, and that helped me to find him when I wanted to talk to him. So I guess in that sense, there have been changes, because I don't think any Russian who's worked for the British government would be living in quite such an exposed way anymore. That they have learned their lessons in that sense, the security service.
And you mentioned how some things have changed since this was, of course, back in 2018. I wonder, in that time frame, how have Russia's aims and strategies and tactics changed?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. In fact, it is in part the subject of a video I've just made for the Times Originals channel, which is that I think partly as a result of what's happened, and of course now, since the Ukraine war started, there's been a much closer attention given to servants of the Russian state to travel in and out of Russia. Obviously, a lot of services were stopped after the 2022 invasion of Ukraine. The Russian intelligence people have started to use different methods. And the idea of sending two colonels in Russian military intelligence to Salisbury to carry out a poisoning, today seems much less likely for that reason. And one of the techniques they've been using, and we saw this in a trial that ended earlier this year in the Old Bailey was to hire British petty criminals, drug dealers, to go and set fire to a warehouse in London where supplies were being gathered for Ukraine. And indeed, across Europe, there have been many other plots of this kind. In other words, people are hired, they're taken on, often online, by Russian intelligence to carry out acts of sabotage or intelligence gathering, and their own people are not risked in the same way. And indeed, your listeners may be interested to learn that one of the things I was told recently by a contact is that those two individuals who appear on the CCTV in Salisbury, going down to carry out that poisoning, are now among the people who train others, including many third country nationals, to carry out operations in Western Europe.
Mark, it's been fascinating to hear the details of your reporting, how you sort of sensed this story before it turned out to be, well, really the global story that it's become. Mark, thank you. Mark Urban, the Times writer and columnist who's extensively covered the Salisbury poisonings.
I find that last point that Mark has made extraordinary. So the two gentlemen, and people will remember that they appeared on camera justifying their visit to Salisbury with the fact that they wanted to see a tall spire and a cathedral. They appeared to be absolute muppets, to use a technical term. The idea that they are still in employment and they're the ones who are training other operatives to come and do terrible things on our shores. We are just such a long way from understanding the logic of the attitude that Russia has towards us and the rest of the world.